Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in again to another edition of Musings from the Mountains. Holidays are over, confusion, everything that's been going on. We're back in the saddle, ready to talk some West Virginia sports. But before we get to that, you know me. I am the bearded, kind of ridiculously bearded, managing editor at WVSports.com, Keenan Cummings, and I'm joined by my sidekick.
The slightly less bearded Serre.
Yes, and we've got a lot to talk about today, as we usually do. West Virginia going on the road to take on an Iowa State team that, for all intents and purposes, is a really good football team. This is a team that started the season with a loss at home and basically has played really, 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 really good football since then. They lost on the road at Oklahoma State in a game that they could have won, but they've beaten Oklahoma, they've beaten Texas. This is their final regular season game at home against West Virginia. Cyclones have won two straight over West Virginia, series 5-3 in favor of the Mountaineers, but the Cyclones have won two in a row, led by Matt Campbell, of course, Blue Lot's favorite coach. That's a joke. Calm down. He is a very good coach, though. You know, we joke around on Blue Lot some, but he's really built that program up and really has been moving in the right direction. When you look at this matchup, it's pretty much what it normally is with Iowa State. You know, they run a unique defensive scheme, kind of play three down. They have five guys they can drop back. Those guys are deceptive because they fit the run from depth. So really, you think you're getting a light box most of the time. You're not. Really hard to run on these guys. West Virginia had 28 carries last year, 41 yards in the game. Obviously, that game was a little bit different. You had your starter knocked out early in the game, Jack Allison. Old Captain Jack had to play, but still, establishing the run is going to be key. Offensively, one of the most balanced teams in the league. Brock Purdy is, if not the top quarterback in the league, one of them. Has potentially an NFL future, has really developed there. He's been playing since he was a freshman and really kind of settled in. Breece Hall leads the Big 12 in rushing by a sizable margin. You know, you look at what Letty Brown has done, 897 yards. You feel like that's a pretty good season in 8 games. Breece Hall has 1,200 in 9 games. He's rushed for over 130 yards in every game but 2. Rushed for over 100 yards in every game but 1, and he had 94, I believe, in that one. So he's been really good. They have a bunch of tight ends they mix in and out to create angles in the run game. That's where they've had success. You know, when you look at this team running the ball on the edges, and a big reason for that is what they can do with their tight ends, motion them, creating extra gaps, and really causing problems. Road game for West Virginia, going to be senior day for Iowa State. When you look at this game on the surface, Jared, what are you looking for if West Virginia wants to go to Ames and try to have some success?
Yeah, I think, you hit it right on the head with Breece Hall. He's a hell of a running back, hell of a playmaker, really. I think the important thing to note here is West Virginia and Iowa State kind of bare bones offensively are fairly even matched, or not even just offensively, but in general, really. You look at it and the stories of these two teams are dominant running back and a solid defense. I believe that West Virginia and Iowa State together are two of the top 3 rushing defenses in the Big 12. Obviously, Breece Hall and Letty Brown are 1 and 2 in running in the conference. So I think it's a fairly even matched game. I think running will be a big part of it, but at the same time, one of the big things Iowa State has is their incorporation of tight ends. We've seen from West Virginia trying to get Mike O'Loughlin and TJ Banks more involved, but Iowa State, as Neil Brown said in his press conference earlier this week, they have the best group of tight ends really in the country, and they use that position group fairly well. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they aid the Iowa State offense, not just in the pass game, but in the run game and the blocking sense as well.
Yeah, we mentioned what they do with the blocking, getting edges, creating extra gaps, but this is a team that throws the ball to the tight end a lot too. They killed Texas with those seam routes in the second half. We were able to mount a comeback and win that game. Tom Herman helped them a little bit with some questionable decision making, but they really do a lot of things. Charlie Kohler is one of the best tight ends in the league. He's battled an injury most of the year. His stats to be even more eye popping. He's a potential pro player. Runs real well. It really is going to be a difficult matchup for West Virginia. But you look at what they do defensively as well. For West Virginia, you got to establish the run. I mentioned that earlier. Letty Brown's going to be key in this one. You got to make some guys miss, and you got to live with kind of little gains at a time. This is a team that tries to keep everything in front of them. a lot of zone concepts in the passing game. I mentioned how they'll fill the box from depth. It looks like you got a favorable box, but you really don't, because you usually have an extra guy in there every snap because everybody's so close to the line of scrimmage and really is pretty much always looking at the football. So take what you can get. You're not going to get a lot of shot plays down the field, but you can move the football on these guys. They're not the 85 Bears. They're obviously very, very good, but they're not even the top defense in the league. That goes to West Virginia. So I'm interested to see how this West Virginia offense, which has been efficient and really for the most part consistent over the second half of this year, is able to sustain drives and kind of keep them in it. Because for as good as West Virginia's defense has played this year, this might be their biggest challenge yet. With Oklahoma left, I'll obviously give it to the Sooners, but this team is a little bit more balanced than what you saw out of Texas. I think Purdy's a better thrower than Sam Ellinger. They have a better running back than Texas does, which is kind of wild to say considering Texas is loaded with 5 stars. But and then the way they use their tight ends and their wide receivers as well. So this is a really balanced attack. They want to control the football, they want to run the ball, and they want to take shots when they can. So this is going to be a challenge for West Virginia's defense. I think obviously we're late enough in the season. Both these teams are what they are in a sense, but I don't think this is an unwinnable game for West Virginia. On paper, it's tough, but you look at the way Iowa State's played, the way West Virginia's played, really it comes down to this. In close games, Iowa State has gotten more breaks than West Virginia. They've made their own breaks, if you want to say it, but they've been able to close games where maybe West Virginia hasn't in a few games. Texas, for example, we could be talking about both these teams having a win over Texas. Instead, Iowa State closed things out and West Virginia didn't. When you look at this on the surface, do you have a prediction right now? How do you feel this game is going to turn out with West Virginia and Iowa State?
So I think right now I have to give the slight edge to Iowa State here just because they're at home. I look at it, it seems to me, I never really like to use the term trap game, but this seems a lot like a trap game to me in the sense of, Iowa State coming off the win against Texas. They've essentially locked up number one, or at least regardless, they've locked up a spot in the Big 12 championship game. So they really don't need a win here. I mean, it helps a ton, of course. I mean, they're number 12 in the country right now, but West Virginia, like I touched on earlier, I think West Virginia and Iowa State are fairly even matched teams. I think that if Letty Brown, has one of those days where he rushes for 200 yards, I think West Virginia will get the win. I don't think that's likely though. But I do think that West Virginia's defense steps up a little bit, maybe limits the tight end production. But ultimately, though, again, being at home field advantage is always crucial, and that's why I have to give it to Iowa State in this one.
Yeah, I got Iowa State in a close one too. I was asked this early this week in our Behind Enemy Lines feature with the Iowa State site, and I think this is going to be a close game. I think this is going to be a very winnable game for West Virginia at times, but I think ultimately Iowa State gets it done. This is Matt Campbell's best team. He had a really good team last year, kind of fell on their face. This year they're doing things that last year's team didn't do. Which, if you're a West Virginia fan, looking forward a little bit to 2021, you're hoping you see the same progression out of the Mountaineers, closing games that they weren't able to close the year before. And that's the major difference in this Iowa State team. They're experienced, they're at home. You got to go with them. One thing we will talk about football related is Neil Brown got rid of him. Any rumors about him going to South Carolina? Not surprising if you've been on the WVSports.com message boards. We had not heard any information to support that outside of things from South Carolina, which, I mean, that's a coaching search. You hear things, some things are good, some things are not, and maybe there was some merit to it, but Neil Brown has squashed it. So he didn't beat around the bush, outright denied it, which is exactly what you want to see if you're a West Virginia fan. You posted something on the board I thought was interesting. When he was asked about the Troy job when he was at Kentucky, it was definitely a different answer, not nearly as just straightforward getting to the point. So good sign. Speaking of coaching searches and how that ties into the program, recruiting-wise, West Virginia has 16 commitments. Believe it or not, guys, we're almost there. The early signing period opens December 16th. That's less than 2 weeks from now. So get ready. West Virginia has 16 commitments right now. I asked Neil Brown about this Tuesday. He said they anywhere between 17 and 19 is what they'd like to sign by the time that December date comes around. That means, anywhere between 1 to 3 guys over the next couple of weeks, which I think is about right. They have 22 available in this class because of what they used some scholarships on the year before. That means that you'll save a couple for transfers, as they've done in the past. Look for linebackers and defensive backs to close things out. Maybe a receiver or an offensive lineman if the right guy falls. But
Yeah,
for now, that's
you
where
can
we
never
stand.
have too many of those.
No, never, never. There's no such thing, especially either offense or defensive lineman. That's why you usually see teams take, you know, 4 to 5 on each side of the ball. Obviously, this year's a little bit different with the rule changes and some seniors that can come back, but that's your typical class. We'll close things out here with basketball. West Virginia hard fought 87 to 82 loss last night to Gonzaga. Had their chances. Bob Huggins not as happy about his performance as perhaps maybe some of us might have been watching it. I thought, from my perspective, West Virginia answered a lot of questions last night. I know they went out to South Dakota and won that tournament, but I had more questions than I had answers about this team. I think that they went toe to toe with Gonzaga last night, and you take out some foul trouble, which you can't obviously, but you take out some foul trouble and maybe a couple calls that didn't go their way, and you might be talking about a win over a number one ranked team. What about you, Jared?
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's one of the best things about playing the number one team in the nation this early in the season. You get the benchmark now, and then you have the whole season to figure out what you need to improve on. I think I don't want to pick on people, but I think if Oscar Sheboy hasn't regressed the way he has early on this season, I think that's the Gonzaga game is a very winnable game for West Virginia. Um, yeah, yes, you'd like a win this early on, but it is what it is. I think this early in the season, I will take that. If I'm Bob Huggins, I will take that game and just learn from it and move forward.
Derek Culver, again, another workman performance. He's played so well this year, and it was kind of sad in a sense to hear him blame himself last night in the post game for what happened. Obviously, he lost 2 rebounds he had in his hands. Weak side help come, knocked him out. Gonzaga scored on both plays. Yes, a big difference in the game, but they wouldn't have been there in the first place without what he was doing in the post. So, tip of the cap to him. You're never going to play a perfect game. That's not the way sports works. But I think overall, this West Virginia team, you need to clean some things up defensively. You need to be able to generate a little bit more offense. But hey, everybody that's watching this, that's an evergreen statement for the West Virginia basketball team. But I like the way this is going. You're not going to get anything cheap. This team has to play some of the best clubs in the nation. You look at what some of these other Big 12 teams are doing right now, and it's been impressive. So you're not going to hide from anybody this year if you're West Virginia. You're going to have to earn it, and we're going to find out some more here coming soon. Hopefully, that Richmond game gets played. They have some COVID issues in their program, which right now at this point, who doesn't have some issues going on with that pretty much in all sports, because that's our new reality. That's 2020 sports, and you got to be prepared for that. But thanks for tuning in again. This has been another edition of Musings from the Mountains. We'd like to see you back next time. We'll have a lot more to talk about. Hopefully we get together after the game, discuss if West Virginia was able to go on the road and get a win at Iowa State, or if they fell short. Regardless, Oklahoma's scheduled for December 12th. It'll be senior day, and I'll be keeping a close eye on which seniors walk, because if they don't, that probably means they're coming back, which is a fun new rule that the NCAA is allowing this year. But thanks for tuning in again. We're glad you're on.